I'm James Helder. Welcome to Full Court Football 24. Quite privileged to be joined by former Leyton Orient, Plymouth Argyle, Birmingham City, Gillingham, Peterborough United, Stevenage Borough and St Albans City star Steve Castle. Steve, I've got to say, it's great to get you on the channel. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. And thanks for having us.
Good. I've got to say, I was just looking at some of your career stats. 550 games in the Football League, 3 massive stays at Leyton Orient, captain of the club, some real big moments to look back on.
Yeah, no, really good. Really good. Been dovetailed in from packing up to going to coaching.
I'd like to look back at the start of all this, at the start of your playing career, growing up in Ilford, a little bit about your family life and how you made that transition from sort of grassroots into professional football.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, and as I say, it's nice to, sort of say what I'm about. And but I come from a place called Barkingside, which is Ilford, and had a terrific upbringing, I think. Mum and Dad, unfortunately, Dad's not around anymore, but he was my biggest supporter. He was a footballer himself. Had trials and played for Crawley and Portsmouth, but mainly his main achievement was just getting to the final of the 1958 Amateur Cup final. So at Wembley, obviously, and it was always an ambition of mine to copy that. I don't mean to be disrespectful to my dad, but probably, I've had a few more highlights than that, and that was good. Schooling, as per normal, I think getting brought up in the 70s and 80s, the concentration of going to school and probably the dedication, it wasn't so much there. I was all for football. I had quite an unusual journey in as much that at that stage, rather than academies now, you could go basically train wherever you liked at pro clubs. So I think my average week training at clubs was Chelsea on a Monday, it'd be Tottenham on a Tuesday, possibly West Ham on a Wednesday, and it would be a snowball effect of having, sort of trial games, as it were. Had a really good game, funny enough, against Leyton Orient for Tottenham. They promised a schoolboy forms. Those schoolboy forms didn't quite happen.
So that would be from Tottenham?
That was from Tottenham, yeah. And, I mean, the names that were at Tottenham at the time were ridiculous.
Go on, name a couple.
Right, you've got Des Walker, you've got Martin Hayes, you've got David Kerslake, you've got Gary Cooper, Keith Jones, Robert Cogner, Perry Suckling, little old me, and John Moncur. And
well, these all in your youth team?
These were all in and around the. No, I wasn't. I got bombed. At
so these are all in the trialist teams and the squads.
These were all in like in the under 14s, under 15s at the time. I was at Tottenham.
That's incredible.
And, well, believe it or not, out of all those that made it, you are talking about England internationals there, and Des Walker. There's an argument that he was one of the best centre halves that come out of that era. And
what do you think made Des Walker such a player, even sort of early on in his career?
Pace and his predictability and his intuition of where the ball was, and his determination. But it was a really talented, but it was hard, and I knew that I wasn't up to the level. If I'm really truthful, I think probably going into my 16th year as a 15-year-old, I was not going through the motions, but I did know it was going to happen. Eventually it happened, in as much that I got released. As I say, my consolation is that everyone got released by John Moncur. They only kept one player out of all of that group that made it as pros.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And like every single one of them that I've mentioned has had Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two.
Gone on to have strong careers.
Oh, brilliant!
A lot of appearances.
And fair play to them, and the resilience that you have to show when you get a knockback. And I had a very good dovetailing relationship, if you like, where my dad knew the youth team guy, Jimmy Allabone at Leyton Orient. He did say that if I wasn't going to take it on at Tottenham, they'd have a look. They had a look. I played one game. I obviously must have done well because they offered me a 2-year apprenticeship. So, and that's really when my journey started up to Leyton Orient.
Tell me that moment initially. How did you get told that you wasn't going to be offered a contract at Tottenham Hotspur? How did that conversation work, and how did you take that news as a young 15-year-old who's very impressionable at that time?
It's really like prevalent at the moment where I'm going through my boy's journey, and he's 15, and a little bit low on certain things, and is he going to be taken on? Is he not? And it does resonate with my journey, just as you've asked the question. And I knew, if I'm truthful, I knew, and it was just an inevitable one, and it was probably a little bit of a sigh of relief that I didn't have to keep on trying to get up to these levels that at the time in my footballing career I weren't at. And it was sort of, right, okay, reset, have another opportunity, which, a lot of lads don't get, and I did. And I think that probably made me the pro that I was, because somehow in my adolescent, immature mind, I got it. I wasn't particularly good at school. I didn't come out with many qualifications. I didn't have a clue, if I weren't going to be a footballer, what I was going to do. And this is where I'm saying about with my son, he hasn't really got that maturity at the moment, where I just thought that it was just that, football or nothing. And that desperation probably really did spur me on. And as I say, I dedicated myself as much as I've ever done between 16 and 18. And I do think that really relied itself for me to become a pro.
What was it like at Leyton Orient, and did you notice a difference from being sort of around Tottenham to being sort of involved with Leyton Orient? How did that sort of work, and how did you handle that change?
It's strange, really. And when I say there was that difference, yes, there was, obviously. But you wouldn't believe how amateurish Tottenham was at the time.
Really?
We had 2 indoor ball courts that were freezing at White Hart Lane. More often than not, every age group would just jump in. There'd be one ball, and you'd have a great big game. Most training sessions. So I went to Orient. I went for work experience and had the trial, and we were over Hackney Marshes, which I knew very well as an East London boy. So it was a level down, 2, maybe even 3 levels down, but it weren't a drastic one, because football hadn't matured. There weren't academies. As I just said to you, I mean, most lads could train wherever they liked. I did have a good spell at Arsenal, and Tony Adams' dad used to take us up every other Monday. I used to take Tony up there every other Monday. David Rocastle, bless his heart, and it was like, I'm not sure about Martin Keown. Even I think he was a year younger, but in my mind's eye, I can't remember him. But as I say, Martin Hayes, who I played club football with, even earlier in my career with Redbridge United, I think it was. But yeah, it was sort of it was a strange one, where it was just unorganised, but the determination that all these lads had at 13, 14, 15. Was immense.
You mentioned Tony Adams. What a career Tony Adams went on to have. Arsenal and England legend, many trophies, and some big moments for him. What was he like as a kid? You've got a valuable insight there of spending time with someone who went on to be sort of a household name, if you like.
Yeah, no, I don't remember it much, and if I'm really truthful, the fact that we used a car share, it goes right over my head, if I'm truthful. And I'm sure if Tony was here and sort of saw, I don't even know if I know Steve Castle, but it was sort of, I'm sure 2 or 3 times, and it was a bit of a link up. character, but you had to be, and I think you had to be either at Tottenham's ground and that atmosphere, which was too much for me. At a 13, 14-year-old kid, even the Arsenal one was. So it was probably a good thing for me to come out of it, be a little bit of a bigger fish. There was only 3 of us who got taken on at Leyton Orient, rather than that competitiveness. And you say, or we say now with young kids, and they've got to mature quickly and they've got to become men. We were men at 13, 14, and that mentality of being physical, being the best, it was just inbred. It might be because it was in a city. We're hardly in a city as Dagenham, because that's where Tony was, and I'm from Ilford. But just that desperation, if you like, that determination that you that was just bred in, that you went into a football career, and that was going to be it. You really had to do it.
3 boys from your age group signed professional terms with Leyton Orient. Talk me through that, signing a contract with the club, and that initial period of becoming from sort of YTS, if you like, to a professional footballer.
Well, yeah, even though you've really got an old one here, mate, because it wasn't a YTS. I was even before then. So it was
before YTS.
It was an official apprenticeship. So same money, but the club paid. So hence the reason we only had 3. Me, a lad called Dave Manning, and Malcolm Hawkes, and we were the 3 apprentices. Whereas I'm sure, and it was, you look very jealous at your West Hams, your Tottenhams, and they were taking on loads. We literally had 3 roles. I done all the boots. Every single boot that was at the club.
We're talking at a time when it was sort of mandatory for you guys to do the boots. You weren't getting away from the boots.
The club wouldn't run. The club wouldn't run. We had Jimmy Allabone, who was our youth team manager, but also was helped out with the kit. So he done the kit with Malcolm Hawkes, I believe. Dave Manning done all the cleaning, and I done all the boots.
Was there any initiations for you guys and new players coming in at that stage? Because football was in a different era back then. It's in a different generation.
Yeah, it was the initiation of waking up and realising what a hard world that was there. I mean, it wouldn't happen in this day and age now. I mean, like, there's no other word for it, but it was bullying. The pros bullied us. We had to stand up for it. It made us stronger. If it didn't, you went.
Is there one story or one moment that sticks in your mind from that period of time regarding sort of them things?
Yeah. And I won't embarrass the fella that done it. I've got a few ones that I still remember now. So, and like, maybe if you want me to share them, maybe on another day. But this one particular is a pro, and he would take his boots off with 1,000 knots in. I tried my hardest to get as many of them knots out, clean the things.
He would purposely knot the boots up then for you?
Yeah. And if there was one single knot there, it'd be like, no physical, but mental and abusive. And yeah, as I say, we didn't know any different, and it wasn't as if anyone was getting particularly picked on, other than the 3 apprentices got it. And yeah, it was just the way it was. It wasn't, I don't think it was noticed by management. We just got on with it. But I tell you what, the 3 of us, we quickly worked out we had to be strong. There was one of the 3, Dave Manning, who was out of Bethnal Green. I was a bit more timid, believe it or not. Malcolm was out of Chinkford. He was probably in between the 2, but Dave just weren't taking any rubbish from day one. And in fairness, it probably taught me and Malcolm how to deal with it, because he stood up for himself straight away. The pros left him alone. and we obviously worked out that you had to look after yourself, you had to stand up for yourself, and they'll leave you alone.
Football back then, such a more physical game. The game's obviously changed and less physicality, but would you be sort of aware of the dark arts of football even at that age? Were you taught to sort of protect yourself on the pitch and look after yourself by the coaches?
Yeah, not coaches. You learn it in the games. You learn it off of your pros. You know, there were some good pros there. Tommy Cunningham, Peter Taylor, Ralph Coates was the youth team. Ian Moores. Who else was there that I can think of? Bill Roffey.
These are tough
Barry
fellas.
Silkman. Yeah, and they all, if not in their play, their character was so determined and dedicated. You know, and if I'm truthful, and you know, don't know how much the podcast will get out, and people listening to this would hopefully, you know, that we're involved in this story. But I wouldn't say it was ability, but the determination and their dedication was second to none.
How did you make that transition from youth team player to then playing reserve team football to then getting a chance to make your debut? How was that period in time? And maybe you can just talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think it's really prevalent for modern football now. You just got jumped in. Right, get on with it. There wasn't any case of having 3 left backs, 3 midfield players, and you could just keep swapping. It literally was. There was 3 apprentices. There was a spot at left back. Right, in you go.
Really?
And get on with it. I remember, I think it was my second week into my apprenticeship as a 16-year-old playing against Millwall, and I must have been awful, but there wasn't much choice, and you got on with it. You got better, or you got released, and it was quite blunt, and that was and that's how it went. But I obviously did some good things. I played youth football back in my midfield slot, and there was an occasion. I was still 16. David Price, I don't know if you remember, a lad from Arsenal. He come on loan at Leyton Orient. Had he not come on loan, I was going to get my debut towards the end of the season. Didn't quite happen. So I thought it would be on my 17th year. That didn't quite happen either. Obviously weren't good enough, I'll be truthful. But I did have the chance, and I got my debut at 18, playing against Bradford City at home in a left-back role, which probably I'll come on to explain, you know, sort of later on in the podcast. But, you know, it was a safe one in as much that, no disrespect to fullbacks or wingers, if you're going to put a young kid in, you know, maybe that wide position where they're not going to be fully dominated, or don't, you know, they can have to take control of the game.
How did you handle your debut? How do you reckon you've done? What marks out of 10 would you give yourself on the ratings?
Well, as we say, I'm pretty honest. So I'd say between 5 and 6 out of 10. Didn't do anything wrong, but pretty clueless defensively. You got to remember, I hadn't played left back up until that season, or just for a couple of years as in the reserves. But it's a very, very complex position if you're going to do it right. And to do it right, you've got to stop crosses, and you've got to tackle, and you've got to do this. And there was a lot of things that I was doing probably going forward, but maybe not defensively. But yeah, again, might be putting myself down a little bit because not in my first game, in my second game, I scored the winner up at Preston North End from a corner. God knows what I was doing up there as a left back, but it just seemed to have, and I did, and as we go through my career, I did always used to have certain moments that must have, when I look back, must have raised a few eyebrows at 18 as a left back, scoring my first goal. And then I think, you know, if you want me to push on from there, just having 3 and 4 games per season. As I say, 18 probably played 6, 7 games. I think 2 or 3 of them were in midfield, mainly as a left back. played a little bit more at left back, and then went into midfield a little bit more in my 19th, 20th year. And I think it was that year that it is a pivotal moment for me that I hadn't got much football. There were better players at the football club in midfield than me. But I managed to, on the last game of the season, it was a complete dead rubber. We couldn't get in the playoffs. We played Rochdale away, and I scored 4 goals. And it's still remembered at Orient now. In actual fact, I've got to say it was 5 goals, and anyone that was there will say it was. Because
they disallowed one?
They disallowed one, and that was on my hat-trick. So
was that from left back?
No.
You'd gone on a rampage. You went up for corners that day, lad.
I'd got back into midfield then. And as I say, it was a dead rubber. There weren't an awful lot in it. I think we were 1-0 down. And I do remember Frank Clark having a massive go at John Sitton. But it turned around. I think I scored and we went in half time. I think it was 1-1. And then, I've ended up like sort of notching another 3, 4.
Would you say that that's the moment that you felt established in the team, in the squad, because you're holding down centre midfield? It's a position you want to play. You're taking a lot of pressure.
Yep.
You're producing performances on the pitch.
And it was the last game of the season. I didn't want the season to end, if you like, really. But I went in, and that confidence level that I had was that I was as an established first team player. As with football, thought that was going to be the case. Started on the bench had a great pre-season, but obviously, and now I'm in management, I get it. What was I hitting? Probably 20. They didn't have the trust in me to play in centre midfield, so I was on the bench. I remember being on the bench and coming off and having an effect.
So you was being used more of an impact sub.
I was really. I think, as I say, now I'm going, and I'm looking in through coaches' eyes and managerial eyes. I probably just couldn't be trusted because I was a little bit run around, kicking, screaming. There weren't an awful lot of finesse in my game, shall we say? But loads of energy. But probably that energy was an awful lot wasted. And but I came on as sub. They kept on giving me minutes. I was getting frustrated because I thought I was good enough to go in. I do remember twice. I think it was probably there's been about 5 or 6 games. We went down to Swansea, 2-1 down. I went on, put a free kick in for us to draw, and then I got a run of games in the team. And as for my Orient career, that actually set it off. And I don't think, bar injury, I come out the team.
We're talking about the football side of things. Let's talk about the camaraderie, the squad. What was it like, sort of in and around the team and the buzz around the place at that moment in time, Steve?
Yeah, it was very old school. Very old school.
Old school in sort of what way?
In as much that everybody had to know their place, and so that the kid on the block, which was me, had to know their place and still make the tees, even though I was a pro.
Really, they'd still have you doing stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, if there weren't an apprentice there, I was the apprentice, even though I was a first, second year pro, to put us in our place. And I get it. It's not. I don't look back on that as if like I know I mentioned the B word, the bullying word, and everything like that. I never saw it as that. I do now, and that's how it was. But then at the same time, you've done an awful lot of these interviews, and maybe in future interviews you might be asking the question, but we didn't know any different, and so it wasn't bullying. It was how it was.
It's just the norm for you guys, wasn't it?
It was the norm. It wouldn't be allowed now. It'd be the red flags would be put up all over the place, and safeguarding, and HR would be onto you, and the amount of coaches that I know that have got the sack from certain doing things that I'm just thinking, oh my God, if they were in a changing room in the mid '80s, they just wouldn't. Everyone would be getting a sack. So it was the norm. I had to grow up. and I grew up quickly. And to be fair, I think it's just made me the person that I am, and go back and probably a player that's lasted as long as I have. I think that's probably I had to call upon all that resilience and determination, regardless of ability.
Football's changed. When people mention the 80s, it seems to be the memories of reckless high challenges and people confronting other players and stuff that you just couldn't deal with nowadays. I mean, how did you handle that going on the field, knowing that if you did take on a player or embarrass a player, there's a good chance he could break your leg at any moment? How did you sort of handle that, if you like?
I think if I'd have dissected it, what you've just done there, and thought about it as much as that, I probably wouldn't be running out onto the football pitch. I just believe we simply didn't actually see it that way. There's one thing about football now, and the cheating, the play acting.
What, in terms of the diving,
yeah,
and players going down and stuff?
Trying to get people booked, trying to get them sent off, faking everything. The modern game now, that really has to look at itself. No, I'm not saying that it's got to go back to how we were. And like, as you say, you just give that, some thought, and, you've just made it sort of like in my mind, wow. But it was a thug's game. You had to look after yourself. There was an awful lot of football played, but there was a camaraderie in amongst you playing against your direct opposite player.
Who was the hard man in that team, Steve? Who was the hard man in that team?
Who was the hard man? There was a few of them. I would probably say John Sitton, Tommy Cunningham, Kevin Nugent, in a different way, Kev. But I think everyone was able to look after themselves. Otherwise, you wouldn't survive. It's as simple as that, and it did change. It changed for the better. It was more skillful coming through over the 20-year span that I did. But you're asking about Leyton Orient when we started. People that probably, because I'm a little bit older than the lads that are at my football club now, but they sometimes ask, and I say, Jimmy Case, he was playing for Brighton. Terry Hurlock was playing for Millwall. Now these are lads that I was in awe of even before I'd actually started.
Terry Hurlock's been listed as one of the toughest men to play football ever in many polls, by the way.
Yeah, and I played against him. Did I give as good as I got? Was I scared? Yes. But was it not? Was it one of them that I just sort of come? I mean, Terry's from Walthamstow, and sort of that's just down the road from me. I'm not saying I knew him very well, but he was, I would put him as a genuine hard man. I mean, if you want a funny story in regards to Jimmy Case, I do tell this quite often. But Jimmy played, obviously, complete and utter legend for Liverpool, and played a little bit wider, didn't he, for Liverpool? But he was at Brighton, and a young Steve Castle was trying to take him on, and I was cocky, and I thought I would give him as much as he got, and the verbals are always one of these things that are part and parcel, and in fairness to me, but it nodded every time he skived me down, and I told him what I thought of him and what I was going to do with him, and he just kept on nodding, and I thought, I can't get under his skin. I was just in complete awe of the man. He was like, not only was I kicking him, he was kicking me, and he was kicking everybody else, and it was that type of game. And it come to the end, and I wanted to go up and shake his hand, probably so he wouldn't smash me in the bar afterwards. But I shook his hand, and he's come eyeball to eyeball, and like that. And for some reason, I went like that, and he went, "I'm sorry," he said, "I'm deaf." So all the abuse that I've been giving him, all that, he didn't have his hearing aid in.
You thought he weren't biting, but
He weren't biting. He didn't hear a word I was saying to him. And so it was, it gave it one to me. I mean, I thought to myself, like, right, what's the old words? Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And he was just so calm and he was so good, but he was probably one of the hardest men I've ever played against.
Incredible. Let's look at the bar thing nowadays. Player bars are now non-existent. There's no sort of alcohol being served to players after games and stuff. What was it like having a bar after the game where your opposition players and you'd have a few beers? Just explain that to me.
It was a necessity for teammates to do it. It would be frowned upon that the older lads just went off and didn't do it. The drink culture was so prevalent. It was inbred in all of us. And Tuesday afternoons after a really good running session, we'd have the Wednesday off. So near enough all of us would be out. If you weren't out, you were fined.
So if you didn't go, I've heard this a couple of times. You didn't go out, you were fined.
Oh yeah,
wages.
Yeah. Or and if it happened too often, it would be a little bit more than a fine, and you'd be getting kicked from here pillar to post in 5-a-sides and everything like that. But yeah, again, it was another one. People who look at that and go, "God, that ain't right." People are allowed to do what they like, but I was a young single lad or single-ish, and I wanted to be part of a really big group and a good group. So yeah, what was the problem with that, And as I say, in regards to the opposition, that was, the petty stuff that goes on in bars and people sort of wanting to do whatever now. The amount of things that are said, even at the level I'm doing now, and like sort of. But you got all your frustrations, you got all your physical side of it out. And I think there was a concentration there, and like sort of it was a compliment to each other. That respect. That's probably where I'm coming from, and there was a mutual respect from both from both sets of players, if the game was played properly.
Explain to me the randomness or the timeline of a Tuesday. Then how would it at work, sort of finishing training and then meeting up with the lads and going out? How would that Tuesday work? Talk us through it.
To be fair, it would be a typical, if there weren't a midweek game, it would be our training session Monday, even harder training session Tuesday. It would be more running on top of ball work. That was our justification to go and get smashed. Really simple as that. And yeah, it would be, the lads would be, we were down Leyton Orient, and at the time there was pubs, on every corner. So I think it was the Rose and Crown. I might be giving that a disservice, but it was at the top of Leyton Orient. We'd be in there, and yeah, not everyone would be there, but as the years went on, there was more and more single guys, so the groups were more, and a few of the older lads had come up for a couple, and then they'd have to go. Obviously, probably now, as I've been doing it, pick up the kids or whatever like that. But it had to be done, and I don't think that left. Really, for the rest of my career, really. I mean, it wasn't me instigating it, but that it was part of a group, and to a degree, it's still prevalent, probably not as obvious.
As well as football on the pitch being a lot more hostile and a lot more violent, life in the terraces as a football fan seemed to be chaotic, to say the least, in the 80s. It's been well documented, the era, the fashion, the obviously the fights between what would be firms and rival gangs of fans. How would you summarise, and how would you put into words what it was like at Leyton Orient with their sort of fans and the travelling support and life in that era?
Yeah, well, obviously Leyton Orient probably comes in the same category as your Barnets, your Southends, your Gillinghams, it was it wasn't the most fashionable of clubs to be supporting, but they had a loyal base, and I wouldn't say that they were renowned for having firms and sort of they certainly weren't any Millwall or anything like that. Big games, what happened? It would be mostly the West Ham would turn up pretending they were Leyton Orient. And so when we played Millwall, we'd get all these thousands of fans that we didn't actually know we had.
So it would be their chance to have a go at their rivals via a different club.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah. So, but no, I couldn't say that Orient were renowned for any sort of like a violent sort of group, but we used to get quite a bit of a hand from West Ham and occasionally Tottenham.
Pick us up from the next season. Now you're an established pro in the team. You're getting game time. You're sort of aspiring to take your game to the next level. You're turning in good performances week in, week out. Pick me up from there.
Yeah, no, I will do. And to be fair, it's one of the things just coming to my mind is that I got offered the club captaincy.
That must have been a huge honour for yourself, coming through the youth system as well with the ranks and making that the reserve team, then to be made club captain.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I think it put a few people's nose out of joint. Main people that were there, and I get that. If I'm, I was at that stage as a 28, 30-year-old lad, and I've been in and around the team, and I'm sort of like leading everything. And then the manager goes and sort of puts a label onto a young 20, 21-year-old. It was a brilliant privilege for me, and I took it as a privilege. I messed that privilege up, which we'll go on to a little bit later. But at the time, it was, and it also, probably my insecurities coming out here, being made club captain, it did really think that I could secure my place just that little bit more as well. So it was a really massive achievement that I really thought a lot of.
Leyton Orient pushing for promotion at this point as well. Do you feel the club was going in the right direction?
I did. The only trouble I would say, looking back over Leyton Orient, we never really had a finishing touch to a campaign. Now we could look at that as us players. We could look at that as the management, but I can honestly look at Leyton Orient and the type of players that we had in the leagues that we were in, whether we'd be in League 2 or what was Division 4, was it? But let's call them the modern thing. We were either in League 2 or League 1 with good competitive teams, beating the teams that were winning. Or winning the titles eventually, but never actually doing it ourselves. We had one instance, I think it was 85. No, it wasn't. Where are we? Right, at the 20th anniversary, so it must have been 89, 90 season, which we're probably pushing on a little bit, but that was our promotion year. But we were third from bottom at Christmas, and we eventually got ourselves up to the playoff place and won it. It wasn't a Wembley appearance, unfortunately. It was going back in the day when there was just one game, and that game was at Brisbane Road in front of about 15,000, and we won. Beat Wrexham 2-1.
Talk me through that moment. What went through your mind when you realised you boys had done it?
Well, if I go back to the start of the season, I had an horrendous injury issue with my groins and my pelvis and everything like that, and I couldn't get myself right. And the team were not doing great. We got knocked out in the cup by Enfield Town, who were a non-league club at the time. So the club were going for a really bad time. As I said, we were third from bottom in League 2. Arguably looking at getting demoted out of league football, and we made a loan signing of a lad called Kevin Campbell from Arsenal. Brilliant lad, Kev.
We've had the pleasure of having Big Kev, Super Kev, on the channel. Great fella.
Great lad, and if you've got contacts with him, just say I said hello. But he was.
I will do.
He's a fantastic lad, and he scored in the 3 months we had him. I think it must have been the January, February, March, and we didn't have him for the playoff final or the playoff games.
That must have been a cruel blow.
Yeah, but he put us in a position to push on. I'd come back into the team.
How good was Super Kev at that stage?
He was as good as you could have got. Yeah. You know, I mean, like the
top level pro with Arsenal experience.
His levels for a reason, yeah. And we were at League Two, and Kev was a Premiership player. You know, even though it didn't exist at the time, but it was sort of, you know, he was so quick, he was so strong. I think he was 19. And you know, as I said, there was some.
So he would have still been at Arsenal at that time, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it was a loan from Arsenal, and you know, I think he went back from there and grew on his career at Arsenal. But you know, a great lad to boot. But I mean, he just didn't realise how strong he was and how he just ran away. And he was too good for League Two. I mean, like, sort of, you know, what a coup that was from, you know, sort of the manager at Leyton Orient at the time, Frank Clark, in getting him. You know, Frank had an unbelievable amount of contacts, and obviously George Graham was one of them. So we got him for the maximum time in 3 months, and it just it put us in a position to get over the line, and we did it that year.
What division would you have been promoted into then?
That would have been to what would have been now would have been into League One. Okay, so if you like, it was from the 4th division into the 3rd division in old money. So from now it would be from League Two into League One, and I think you know, I think the club itself stayed there for the rest of the duration. I left it in '93.
Now, just before you left, there was a lot of rumours circulating. I know Kenny Dalglish was interested in you. I think Wimbledon were looking at you as well. There was a lot of transfer speculation regarding what was going to go on with your future and your career. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah,
what sort of went on?
I mean, it was. I mean, and as I say, I always look back on it now. You know, you know, sort of having, you know, the coach's head and the coach's experience and the managerial experience. I was an attractive proposition to higher clubs, and you know, I was very, very fortunate. Tottenham were interested. Apparently, West Ham had made a bid. Who else was there? Liverpool, Newcastle when I was at Plymouth. Coventry had made a bid when I was at Plymouth.
Kenny Dalglish and Liverpool were looking at you.
They did.
They were the team of the 80s. I got it confirmed
by Sammy Lee, to be fair.
They were the team of the 80s.
I know.
Hansen, you know, and...
Yeah. I mean, I personally didn't think I was good enough, but I did score goals. And to be fair, you look at that and you think, right, okay, if you can score goals, you've always got a chance as a midfield player. I mean, the biggest compliment I ever got about myself and my abilities, that I was a lower league Brian Robson, which I would take all day long. Whether never ever in his quality with his skill, because he was a lot skilled, but probably the issue that I did get,
the passion,
the determination to win a game of football, and the thing that I could get double figures every season,
plus the leadership qualities as well.
Yeah,
being a captain and bringing other teammates through, and the desire and passion.
No,
and stuff.
I was club captain, as I say. You know, we're probably going to move on to Plymouth, and you know, I was club captain there. I was player coach up at Peterborough when eventually I got up to there. And as I say, you know, we've already said about Leyton Orient being club captain at Leyton Orient.
So what happened then? What happened with the transfer speculation, and what sort of, where did you go, and what?
Well, I'd love to know the full story. If I'm truthful, I don't think I got the whole story of these bids. I always got them second hand. I did get it confirmed. I was doing my full badge at Lillishall, and Sammy Lee was doing it at the same time, and we had a beer, and he confirmed it about Liverpool.
Wow. What did he say? What did he actually say then?
In a Scouse accent, that I was on the radar, and that they were really seriously looking at a bid. But for what reason, I don't know. I don't know. And I know Tottenham were really interested because Patsy Holland was my youth team manager, but he'd gone over to Tottenham at the time. And there was 2 or 3 little whispers, but nothing really concrete. The only thing that was concrete at the end of the season, and I don't know what year it was. I'm sorry, but Wimbledon came in, and I went over to have a chat with Bobby Gould.
And they was in full flow crazy gang
this
mode,
was
weren't they?
was the year before they won the cup.
Brilliant.
Year before they won the cup, and I was all for it. And I think it was the last time I've been around South London, to be fair. But I came over, I saw Bobby Gould. He was very, very strict or very tight with his negotiations. But bottom line, I was looking at signing because I wanted to
Further yourself as a player.
Further my career.
Yeah.
Bobby had sold it to me that this is what it was. This is all they could afford, which I'm sure that wasn't the case. And bottom line is I was coming to Wimbledon on less money than what I was at Leyton Orient. And believe you me, I wasn't on a lot of money at Leyton Orient. But I said yes. I'd agreed it. We shook hands. And that's the last I heard of the deal.
Really?
So it was quite embarrassing.
You didn't sign a contract then? It was just a verbal
I didn't sign a
agreement.
contract. We went over. I saw Keith Curl. He introduced me to a couple. I think it was the centre forward, Cork. I think the right back. So it was close season. There was a few lads in at Plough Lane. Obviously, we are going back a few years, as I say. I drove myself over there. I didn't have any negotiations, so probably I should have done, the old agent.
No agent, nothing.
No. I just went over there on my own, and I got stuffed. I got stiffed. I would have been on a lot less money. My dad being my dad, he's probably, I am a remodelling of my dad, and he sort of said, "Well, you'll get your money if you go and do the business," which is true. So I just said, right, okay, I'm going to take less money. No signing on fee, I don't think. Yet again, looking back on it now, I'm sort of thinking, did they really want me that much? But cut a long story short, it was the year after we got promoted, and I had that injury that I said to you that I had with my groins and my pelvis. I had played from February onwards, right the way through all the thing. I hadn't missed a game. I hadn't missed a training session. Wimbledon got spooked by it. I did later hear that our physio, Bill Songhurst, made a phone call and was quite annoyed that Wimbledon were questioning the injury. I think that just set alarm bells off with Wimbledon. And all I can assume, because no one's ever told me any different, is that they just went, they pulled the plug. The last words I got from Bobby Gould was, "Congratulations, son, you're now a Wimbledon player. I'll see you at Heathrow for the for pre-season at Sweden." Sorry. And I kept on ringing. I got no answer.
So
I didn't know what I was doing.
Answer the phone.
No, I didn't have any answer. They obviously went off to Sweden, and then I got a very apologetic secretary of Wimbledon, and he said, "I don't really know what's going on." I'm sure he did. He said, "But if I were you," he said, I'd look for another club, because I'd obviously, if you remember, I'd bombed out Leyton Orient. Thankfully, they offered me a 3-year deal. They put me on a lot better money, and I signed the 3-year deal. I probably shouldn't have done, if I'm truthful, because I had been there for a long while. I did enjoy it, but I was ready to spread my wings.
Do you feel that at that time mentally felt like you'd accomplished everything you could with the club, and you was at a level where you needed to go further?
Yeah. There was an awful lot of speculation. As I say, there was nothing concrete.
Maybe you had your head turned a little bit by all the speculation as well, the big clubs and Liverpools and the Wimbledons, etc.
Yeah, and I had just joined an agency as well, Jerome Anderson, who was a very big too big for a Leyton Orient footballer. He had David Rocastle, we had Thierry Henry, had Ian Wright, but I decided I signed a contract before I signed up with the agency. But I did always, from there on in, I think it was a 2-year deal, but I did always have an idea then that I had to move away from Leyton Orient, probably financially. And one thing that's just so wrong in football is that if you show loyalty and you stay at a football club, you're not always the ones that are getting looked after money-wise. The money people, and I'm not going to put names to them because good luck to them when they come into clubs, they come into Leyton Orient, they come into Plymouth, and when they, whatever. If you're not the homegrown one, they'll look after you and they'll give you that incentive to come to the club. If you've just come through the ranks and it's basically, right, well, this is what we can offer you. And being club captain, being top goal scorer, being that there was speculation about other ones, I thought that's a bit unfair. And I'm all for everything being fair. And it did get me, I think I must have been about 23, 24, just probably looking elsewhere and probably having an eye on where was the next stage.